Welcome back, Goodness Keepers. Hope you've had a great start into 2022. Today we are taking a more in-depth look at measurements. This video is a request made by a couple of our viewers. As always, thank you for your video suggestions, Goodness Keepers. So how do you measure out wax flakes and oils to make one or several candles? I will show you a formula and technique which works for me. You will be able to apply this formula to any size candle container that you wish to use. I will show you a calculation for 3 examples. A. How to make one candle for a 435 milliliter jar. B. How to make one candle to fill only 2/3 of a 435 milliliter jar. And C. How to make 5 candles in a 435 milliliter jar, filling 2/3 of each jar. Let's start with making one candle in a 435 milliliter jar. So I have a container or jar that holds 435 milliliters. These 435 milliliters are equal to 435 grams, more or less. The important thing to know is that wax flakes have a different density in their solid state than when they are melted. This means that 435 grams of wax flakes do not weigh the same when melted. You cannot melt 435 grams of wax flakes and expect to get 435 grams of melted wax. It will weigh a bit more than that in its melted state. Therefore, I use a formula to figure out how much wax flakes I need to fill up a 435 milliliter container. You will take the container volume and subtract 20% of that volume to get the amount of wax flakes needed. That means I will subtract 435 grams with 20% of 435. How much is 20% from 435? Let's do a little percent calculation excursion. If 435 grams are 100% of what I've got, how much is 20% of this? I will multiply 435 with 20 and divide that result by 100. This gives me 87 grams. That means 20% of 435 are 87 grams. Now, let's put the 87 into the previous formula. 435 grams minus 87 grams gives me 348 grams wax flakes needed to fill up the container. I need 348 grams of wax flakes to fill a container of 435 grams volume. Moving on to example B, how to fill 2/3 of a 435 milliliter container. I'm using the same formula as just before. Jar or container volume minus 20% of the same volume to find out how much wax flakes are needed to fill that whole container. But how much are 2/3 of 348 grams? To find out, I will divide 348 by 3. That way, I will divide the amount of wax I am working with into 3 equal parts, and I will multiply the result times 2 in order to find out how much 2 parts of those 3 equal parts are. I've illustrated this for you. 2/3 equal 232 grams of wax flakes that I will need to fill up 2/3 of the container. On to example C, where I want to know how much wax flakes I need for 5 containers with a volume of 435 milliliters, but I only want to fill up 2/3 of each container. Very simple. We now know that we need 323 grams of wax flakes to fill up 2/3 of one container. How much grams of wax flakes do I need to fill 5 containers? I will take 323 grams times 5 to find out. This gives me an amount of 1160 grams of wax flakes. And what about oil ratio? The wax I'm working with can safely hold up to 6% oil ratio. You can find out how much oil your wax can safely absorb from your wax supplier. So how much is 6% of 1160 grams of wax that I will be using? Yes, it is another percentage calculation excursion. If 1160 grams are 100%, how much are 6% of that? I will multiply 1160 with 6 and divide the result by 100. So 6% of 1160 are 69.6 grams of oil that I will need. Let's dive even deeper into the oil ratio. What if I'm not using just one oil fragrance? What if I wanted to use, let's say, 3 different fragrances? Let's say I wanted to use these 3 different fragrances in diverse amounts. So for example, 3 parts lavender, 2 parts orange, and 1 part mint. I will calculate the parts that I'm using, which gives me 6 parts in this example. I will take 69.6 grams and divide them by 6. That shows me the amount of oil per part, which is 11.6 grams. So for 3 parts, I would need 11.6 times 3. For 2 parts, I would need 11.6 times 2, and for 1 part, I would need 11.6 grams. And ta-da! Now I know how much of which fragrance I need to use for 1160 grams of wax. Hope you found this video helpful and easy to follow. Practice makes perfect, and the more you do this, the better you will get at it. Thank you so much for watching, Goodness Keepers. Thank you again for this video suggestion. If you've liked this video, or if you would like for us to elaborate further on anything from the calculation and formula, please let us know in the comments below. Thank you again and see you next time. Bye everyone!